Again, the figures are, I think, from 2014, but roughly 9 million U.S. jobs depend on trade and investment with Canada. To look at New York alone, roughly 650,000 jobs are dependent on Canada in terms of movement of trade and investment. So there are lots of jobs that are being created as a result of trade and with Canada, and that doesn't even include subsidiary affiliates that are Canadian that might be hiring in the United States. That's an additional, as I understand it, an additional 500 to 600,000 U.S. jobs. So when you look at, our financial institutions, BMO Bank is a classic example, has a great regional footprint. Their subsidiaries in the U.S., Harris Bank and others, they're hiring Americans, right? So it's not an easy conversation in terms of what do they do that creates jobs. I think they're already creating jobs, and I think trade is creating jobs. If you want to create more jobs, then I think you do more trade, and you find a way of not gumming up the border in terms of mergers and acquisitions and movement of capital and movement of goods.
So when it comes to immigration, NAFTA really touches people in 4 different ways. There's the business visitors, the Treaty of Friendship and Commerce that NAFTA is. It expands and clarifies some of the business visitor category that exists for the rest of the world. There is the intercompany transfer, there is the TN professional category, and then there is the e-visas. The business visitor category is not going to be affected terribly regardless of what happens with NAFTA. Intercompany transfers exist separate and apart from NAFTA. The only difference is that Canadians can file at a port of entry and get an answer on the spot instead of having to file through a service center. So even if something happens with NAFTA, the intercompany transfer category remains. The TN professional category could go away, and that is the area that we're seeing probably the most angst right now. And what we've been suggesting to people is our H-1B season is coming up. H-1B is a category that there's a limit on the number that are available on an annual basis, and for the last several years, and prior to 2008 as well, it is oversubscribed annually. Last year they received about 3 times as many petitions for the numbers that were available. So we're throwing it out there to our TN clients that you may want to see if you can get an H. That way if the TN goes away, you're covered. If the TN doesn't go away after a few years on an H, you can always reserve.
Latches onto is the loss of U.S. jobs to Mexico, the loss of U.S. jobs to Canada. And I think the reality of the situation is that the NAFTA agreement, especially for New York being a border state, it's created a lot of jobs. And you have to look at the jobs that it creates in the logistics industry. People like Marty that are doing the transportation, doing the warehousing, brokerage companies that are doing the transactions at the border. And then if you look to Mexico, we may be moving jobs to Canada or Mexico in factories, but how many jobs are being saved in North America as a whole versus going over to Asia? And then if you look at that a little bit further, a lot that's missed in this conversation about U.S. jobs is automation. We do not need as many employees on a factory floor as we did in the 1950s. We're not going back to that golden age of getting out of high school and getting a factory job. It's a different, we need skilled labor. I was in Ohio a couple of months ago. We went to a seminar, and there's a large connection between Northeast Ohio and Southern Ontario. There's a lot of freight going back and forth between those 2 geographic areas. And they were saying they have over 7,000 jobs available in Northeast Ohio for skilled labor that are paying over $50,000 that they cannot fill. Mm-hmm. So there are U.S. jobs out there, and the effect that NAFTA has on them, I don't think there's ever been a study done. I don't know of one that says these are how many jobs NAFTA has created versus these are how many jobs that NAFTA has eliminated.
From our larger clients, we have the additional anxiety of, geez, we have all these suppliers that are now in Mexico. building product, and if we disturb that, geez, we've invested a bunch of money in, our plants in Mexico, and we've been bringing product in. What's going to happen to our investment? Can we afford to be importing the product from Mexico if we get rid of NAFTA? And so there's a lot of big money that has been invested by the Fortune 500s and the automotives in particular. I would guess that probably well over 40% of our car components are now coming out of Mexico, as opposed to out of the Orient. And yeah, there's some transshipment going on where those those factories are importing from the Orient, bringing it into Mexico, and then remanufacturing or reproducing or adding value to those components, but it's still coming out of Mexico, and that's a lot of anxiety coming out of Detroit.
Over 650,000 jobs in New York State alone are related to, investment and trade in New York State. And the trade that we represent along this region of Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Southern Ontario, that golden horseshoe, the fourth largest mega region in North America. If this entity right there, that horseshoe, was a country in itself, it would be the 16th largest country in the world, equivalent to the GDP of Australia, Sweden. And one of the things that I highly would doubt that NAFTA would be, that relationship would be impacted between U.S. and Canada. But now with that being said, Mexico, however, I think there's going to be more pressure with foreign direct investment going into Mexico. And will companies be penalized? I don't think so. I think there'll be more of an incentive for companies to, think twice about where they're going to make their foreign direct investment.